The distress signal had been repeating for 6 hours before anyone answered it. Ambassador Drell Sarati pressed his four-fingered hands against the communication console, watching the same message play again and again. His compound eyes reflected the orange warning lights that filled the control room of the Valoran mining colony on Tessari 7. Please, the message said. Anyone. The Krassith swarm has surrounded our planet. We have 4,000 workers and their families. We cannot fight them. We need help. The first response came from a Trilani patrol ship 3 systems away. Captain Yelleth of the Gentle Current listened to the message, checked his crew roster of 12, and politely declined. The Krassith numbered in the tens of thousands. What could 12 crew members do against such a force? We will forward your request to the Galactic Council, Captain Yelleth said. Perhaps they can arrange diplomatic talks. Ambassador Sarati felt his heart sink. Diplomatic talks would take weeks. The Krassith would break through their shield generators in days. But Captain Yelleth did one other thing. He forwarded the distress call to the Terran Federation, mostly as a formality. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had joined the Council only 40 years ago. What could they possibly offer? 8 hours later, Ambassador Sarati received a response. Valoran Colony, this is General Patricia Mwangi of Earth Command. Your distress call has been received. Hold your position. Help is coming. Sarati felt confused. General, what assistance can you send? We need at least 30 soldiers to reinforce our security teams. There was a pause. Then General Mwangi spoke again, and her voice carried something Sarati did not recognize. Later, he would learn humans called it determination. Ambassador, we are not sending 30 soldiers. We are sending the 77th Rapid Response Battalion. 800 combat personnel with full support units. For destroyer escorts. 12 transport ships. They will arrive in 18 hours. Sarati could not speak. He had asked for a small team. The humans were sending an army. Aboard the carrier ship Unbroken Spirit, Commander Reina Okonkwo stood before her soldiers. She was 42 years old, with gray streaks in her short black hair and scars on her hands from 20 years of service. Her eyes moved across the faces of her battalion. Listen up, she said. In 18 hours, we will reach Tessari 7. A mining colony of Valoran civilians is surrounded by hostile forces. They have children there. Families. Workers who never signed up for war. She paused and let those words settle. The Galactic Council has decided this is not their problem. Some patrol captain decided 12 crew members against thousands of enemies was a bad trade. Her voice hardened. We do not calculate lives like that. We do not weigh the cost of helping strangers against the comfort of doing nothing. Lieutenant Kofi Mensah, her tactical officer, watched from the side. He was 29 and had served under Okonkwo for 3 years. He had seen her lead soldiers through impossible situations, but he had never seen her look this focused. The Krassith swarm believes they have already won, Okonkwo continued. They believe no one will come. They believe these Valorans are alone. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They are about to learn something about humans. First Sergeant Ade Bota, a massive man with a shaved head and gentle eyes, spoke up. Commander, what are our rules of engagement? Protect the civilians, Okonkwo answered. Every single one. If a Valoran child is in danger, you put yourself between that child and whatever threatens them. No exceptions. No hesitation. Bota nodded. That was the answer he expected. The fleet traveled through hyperspace, and the soldiers prepared. They checked their weapons. They reviewed maps of the colony. They studied what little information existed about Krassith tactics, and they waited on Tessari 7. Ambassador Sarati watched the Krassith ships circle his planet like hungry predators. Their commander, a creature called Krithax, had sent one message. Surrender the planet and its minerals. Your lives may be spared. Resist, and you will be erased. Sarati had not responded. What could he say? His people were miners, not warriors. They had no army. They had no weapons that could challenge the swarm. But they had sent a message into the void, and someone had answered. 18 hours later, the sky above Tessari 7 split open with light. 12 transport ships emerged from hyperspace, surrounded by 4 warships that bristled with weapons. The Unbroken Spirit led the formation, its hull scarred from a dozen previous battles. Ambassador Sarati stood on the observation platform and watched the human fleet arrive. Tears ran from his compound eyes. a biological response his species rarely displayed. They came, he whispered. They actually came. Beside him, a young Valoran worker stared at the ships with wide eyes. Ambassador, how many soldiers did they send? Sarati checked the communication from the human commander. His voice shook when he answered. 800. They sent 800 soldiers to save 4,000 strangers they have never met. Across the void, the Krassith swarm fell silent. Swarm Commander Krithax studied the human vessels and felt something unfamiliar. His species did not know fear. They were conquerors. They were the hunters of 100 worlds. But as he watched those human ships take position around the planet, weapons charging and dropships preparing to launch, Krithax understood that something had changed. The prey had called for help, and the galaxy's most dangerous protectors had answered. Fire rained from the sky as the first human dropships descended toward Tessari. 7. Private First Class Nadia Russo gripped her medical kit and watched the planet's surface grow larger through the small window. She was 22 years old, trained as a combat medic, and this was her third deployment. But she had never seen a landing zone this hot. Krassith anti-aircraft fire streaked past the dropship, green bolts of plasma that could melt through hull plating. The pilot, a woman named Chun, cursed and threw the ship into evasive maneuvers. 30 seconds to ground. Chun shouted, "They really don't want us here." Sergeant Major Obiora E. sat calmly beside Russo, his weathered face showing no concern. He was 45, a logistics specialist who had survived more combat drops than most soldiers would see in a lifetime. "They never want us anywhere," E. said. "That's usually how we know we're needed." The dropship hit the ground hard, and the rear doors flew open. Human soldiers poured out into chaos. Krassith warriors were already advancing on the landing zone, their insectoid bodies moving with terrifying speed. They stood 7 feet tall, covered in natural armor, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Commander Okonkwo's voice crackled through every helmet radio. "Establish the perimeter. Engineers, get those fortifications up. Medical teams, set up the aid station behind the main line." Chief Engineer Yuki Tanaka sprinted toward the designated construction zone with her team. She carried equipment that would have taken a full Valoran crew 3 days to deploy. Her team would have basic fortifications ready in 4 hours. "Move it," Tanaka shouted. "I want walls and gun emplacements before these bugs figure out what we're building." The first Krassith wave hit the human lines 20 minutes after landing. They expected the new arrivals to be disorganized, still setting up their positions. They expected easy kills. They were wrong. Lieutenant Mensa had positioned heavy weapons teams at every approach. When the Krassith charged, they ran into a wall of automatic fire that cut through their ranks. The aliens fell by the dozens, then by the hundreds, but more kept coming. Ambassador Sarati watched from the colony's central tower, unable to believe what he was seeing. The humans fought like nothing he had ever witnessed. They moved together, covering each other, advancing and retreating in perfect coordination. When one soldier fell, 2 more immediately filled the gap. "How do they do this?" Sarati asked a human communications officer who had been assigned to protect him. The young man, barely out of training, shrugged. "We train together, sir. We eat together, sleep together, fight together. These people are my family. I would die for them, and they would die for me." Sarati did not understand. His species valued individual survival above all else. The idea of sacrificing oneself for others was foreign to Valoran culture. But watching these humans throw themselves into danger for strangers, he began to see something powerful in their philosophy. Near the medical station, Nadia Russo faced her first real test. A group of Valoran workers had been caught in the open when the attack began. They were huddled behind a broken vehicle, with Krassith warriors closing in from 2 sides. Russo did not wait for orders. She grabbed her rifle and ran toward the civilians. "Cover me," she shouted to her squad point. 3 human soldiers followed without hesitation. They reached the Valorans just as the Krassith attacked. The battle was brutal and close. Russo shot one alien in the face while it tried to grab a Valoran child. Another soldier tackled a Krassith warrior twice his size, giving Russo time to pull the civilians to safety. When it was over, for humans had minor injuries. 0 Valorans had been harmed. The Valoran child, a small creature with trembling wings, looked up at Russo with huge compound eyes. "Why did you save us? You do not know us." Russo knelt beside the child and smiled. That's exactly why we saved you. Because someone should. By nightfall, the human perimeter was secure. Fortifications surrounded the civilian housing areas. Medical stations treated both human and Valoran wounded. Supply lines delivered ammunition, water, and food to every position. Sergeant Major Ease walked the lines, checking on each squad. He made sure everyone had what they needed. That was his job, and he did it perfectly. Commander Okonkwo received a report from the front lines. The Krasith had lost over 3,000 warriors in the first day of fighting. Human casualties stood at 12 dead and 47 wounded. First Sergeant Bota joined her at the command post. They're pulling back to regroup. Probably didn't expect this much resistance. They expected to roll over a bunch of miners. Okonkwo replied. They got a battalion instead. Across the battlefield, Swarm Commander Krithax reviewed the day's losses with growing unease. His warriors had faced many enemies across many worlds. They had always won through numbers and ferocity, but these humans did not fight like other species. They did not break when their friends died. They did not flee when they were outnumbered. They stood their ground and fought with a fury that matched his own warriors. And strangest of all, Krithax had seen footage of humans carrying wounded Valorans to safety. They were not just fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for people. Krithax opened a communication channel to his superiors. I require reinforcements. These humans are not what we expected. The response came quickly. What do you mean? Krithax watched the human lines through his surveillance drones. He saw soldiers sharing food with Valoran children. He saw medics treating alien wounds with the same care they gave their own. They are not conquerors, Krithax said slowly. They are protectors, and that makes them far more dangerous. The second sunset on Tessari 7 brought no peace. Corporal Diego Herrera had been awake for 36 hours. His eyes burned. His muscles ached. But when the Krasith launched their night assault, he was at his gun position before the first warning alarm finished sounding. Here they come again, someone shouted from the darkness. Thousands of Krasith warriors poured from the treeline, their natural armor glinting under the planet's 2 moons. They moved without torches or lights, using their compound eyes to navigate the darkness. They expected humans to be blind and helpless. They were wrong again. Human soldiers had spent the evening placing sensor drones and infrared cameras across the battlefield. When the Krasith charged, they ran straight into coordinated defensive fire from soldiers who could see every movement. Herrera's heavy weapon roared, cutting down aliens by the dozen. His position guarded a narrow passage between 2 rock formations. If the Krasith broke through here, they would have direct access to the civilian shelters. I need more ammunition, Herrera shouted. Private Kwame Asante, the youngest member of the squad at 20 years old, sprinted through enemy fire carrying a fresh ammunition box. He dove into the position just as a plasma bolt struck the ground where he had been standing. Thanks, kid, Herrera said, already reloading. Now stay down and cover my left. Asante raised his rifle and did exactly that. Across the defensive line, Staff Sergeant Amara Diallo watched the battle through her sniper scope. She was 31, patient as stone, and she had not missed a shot in 4 years. Her targets were not the regular warriors. She hunted commanders. The Krasith organized their attacks through a hierarchy of leaders who directed warriors through pheromone signals and battle cries. Kill the commanders, and the warriors became confused and uncoordinated. Diallo found her first target, a Krasith wearing distinctive red markings on its shell. She breathed out slowly, squeezed the trigger, and watched the alien fall. Around it, dozens of warriors suddenly lost direction, bumping into each other and attacking without purpose. Commander down, Diallo reported calmly, moving to next target. By midnight, she had eliminated 11 Krasith commanders. The enemy assault had become chaos. In the civilian sector, Elder Velathai gathered the colony's children in the deepest shelter. The old Valoran had lived through many hardships, but nothing like this. Through the walls, she could hear the constant thunder of human weapons and the screaming of Krasith warriors that a young human soldier stood guard at the shelter door. He could not have been older than 25, but he held his rifle with steady hands and watched the entrance with focused eyes. Are you not afraid? Elder Velathai asked him. The soldier smiled slightly. Terrified, actually. But those kids behind you are counting on me to keep them safe. Fear doesn't matter when someone needs your protection. Velify studied this strange creature. Humans were so soft, so fragile compared to most galactic species. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. Yet here they were, fighting against impossible odds to protect aliens they had never met. Why do your people do this? Velify asked. We have nothing to offer you. No wealth, no technology, no strategic value. Why risk your lives for us? The soldier was quiet for a moment. Then he answered simply, because you asked for help, and we were able to give it. Outside, the battle raged through the night. Commander Okonkwo moved constantly between positions, checking on her soldiers, adjusting defenses, and directing reinforcements where they were needed most. She found First Sergeant Bota holding a position with only 6 soldiers against a force of over 200 Krasith. They had been fighting for hours without relief. Fall back to the secondary line, Okonkwo ordered. Fresh troops will take over. Bota shook his head. With respect, Commander, if we move now, they'll breach this section before the replacements arrive. We hold until the line is secure. Okonkwo looked at the exhausted soldiers around Bota. They were covered in dirt and alien blood, barely standing, but none of them showed any sign of giving up. You have 30 minutes, she said. Then you're getting pulled whether you like it or not. Bota grinned through his exhaustion. That's plenty of time. They held for 45 minutes. When the relief force finally arrived, Bota's squad had stopped over 300 Krasith without losing a single soldier. As dawn broke over Tessari, 7. The Krasith withdrew once more. They had thrown everything they had at the human lines, and every attack had failed. Lieutenant Mensa delivered the casualty report to Commander Okonkwo. We lost 23 last night. 62 wounded, but most can return to duty. Okonkwo closed her eyes for a moment. 23 soldiers. 23 families who would receive messages they never wanted to read. And the Krasith? Best estimate is over 8,000 dead. Their commander has been screaming for reinforcements all night. Okonkwo nodded slowly. The humans were winning, but the war was far from over. The Krasith swarm had endless numbers. Eventually, those numbers would matter. Tell everyone to rest while they can, she ordered. This was just the beginning. Across the battlefield, Swarm Commander Krithax received the response he had been waiting for. Hive Overseer Vexathan, supreme military authority of the Krasith swarm, was coming personally with 30,000 additional warriors. The message was clear. These humans had embarrassed the swarm. That embarrassment would be repaid in blood. But watching his warriors tend their wounds and count their dead, Krithax wondered if even 30,000 would be enough. The sky darkened with Krasith ships on the third day. Captain Fatima al-Rashid counted the incoming vessels from her position in orbit and felt her stomach tighten. 30 transport ships. Thousands of warriors packed into each one. The reinforcements that Swarm Commander Krithax had requested were arriving, and they were bringing hell with them. Commander Okonkwo, al-Rashid reported through the communication channel. We have a problem. 30,000 additional hostiles incoming. They'll reach the surface within 4 hours. On the ground, Okonkwo received the news without visible reaction. Her soldiers were watching. They needed to see strength, not fear. Understood, Captain. Continue air support operations. We'll handle the ground. She turned to find Ambassador Sarati standing nearby, his compound eyes wide with terror. Commander, we must evacuate. 30,000 more. Against your 800? It is impossible. Nothing is impossible, Okonkwo replied. Difficult, yes. Impossible, no. The Galactic Council chose that moment to send their message. Counselor Thessa Vorn, a Trilani diplomat, appeared on the communication screen with a carefully practiced expression of concern. Commander Okonkwo, the Council has reviewed the situation. We are prepared to offer diplomatic mediation with the Krasith swarm. However, this would require the immediate withdrawal of Terran forces. Okonkwo stared at the screen. Let me understand this. You want us to leave these people defenseless so you can have talks with the creatures trying to exterminate them? Counselor Vorn shifted uncomfortably. The diplomatic process requires neutral ground. Your presence complicates negotiations. My presence is the only reason anyone is still alive to negotiate for. Okonkwo's voice dropped to ice. We came to save these people. We are not leaving until they are safe. End of discussion. She cut the communication before Vorn could respond. Specialist Brendan O'Neill, The battalion's communication expert approached her with a datapad. "Commander, I intercepted something you need to see. Krassith Internal Communications." Okonkwo read the intercepted messages, and her blood turned cold. The Krassith were not here for the planet's minerals. They never had been. Their true orders were complete extermination of all Valoran life. The mining colony was just the beginning. After Tessari 7, they planned to strike every Valoran settlement in the sector. "Get this to the Galactic Council," Okonkwo ordered. "Every news outlet, every diplomatic channel, everyone who will listen. The galaxy needs to know what the swarm really is." The information spread quickly. Within hours, species across the galaxy were reading about the Krassith plan for genocide. The political situation shifted. Suddenly, the Council's calls for diplomatic mediation looked very different. But politics would not stop the 30,000 warriors descending toward Tessari 7. That Hive Overseer Vexithin landed with the first wave of reinforcements. He was massive, nearly 9 feet tall, with scarred armor plates that showed centuries of combat experience. He surveyed the battlefield with cold satisfaction. "These humans have fought well," Vexithin admitted to Krithax. "But courage means nothing against numbers. We will crush them and their precious civilians together." The assault began at midday. Krassith warriors attacked from every direction, a tide of claws and plasma weapons that seemed endless. The human lines bent under the pressure. Dr. Grace Nyambura worked frantically in the medical station, treating wounds as fast as soldiers arrived. Her hands were covered in blood, both human and Valoran. She had been awake for 50 hours and showed no signs of stopping. "Doctor, you need rest," a Valoran nurse said. "I'll rest when everyone is stable," Nyambura replied, already moving to the next patient. Not before. On the front lines, Lieutenant Mensa coordinated defensive fire while running between positions. A Krassith warrior broke through the line directly in front of him. Mensa drew his sidearm and emptied the magazine into the creature's face, then grabbed a fallen rifle and kept fighting. "Hold the line," he shouted. "Nobody falls back. Nobody." The humans held. Against all logic, against all odds, they held. Elder Velithai watched from the civilian shelter, unable to understand what she was seeing. The humans were outnumbered almost 50 to 1. They should have been overwhelmed hours ago. But they kept fighting, kept dying, kept defending. "Why do they not surrender?" Velithai asked Ambassador Sarati. They could negotiate their own survival. The Krassith might spare them if they simply walked away. Sarati had been watching the humans for 3 days now. He had seen them share their food with Valoran children. He had seen them carry wounded aliens to safety while under fire. He had seen them weep over fallen comrades, then pick up their weapons and fight again. "I asked Commander Okonkwo the same question," Sarati said slowly. "She told me something I did not understand at first. She said that walking away while innocents died would be a fate worse than death." Velithai considered this. They truly believe that. They believe it so deeply that they are willing to die for it. Sarati's voice carried wonder and something like reverence. "I have studied many species in my career as ambassador. I have never encountered anything like humans." As the sun began to set on the 3rd day, the human lines had shrunk but not broken. Over 100 soldiers had fallen. The medical stations were overflowing. Ammunition was running low. Commander Okonkwo stood at the center of her shrinking perimeter and made a decision. She opened a communication channel to Earth Command. "This is Commander Okonkwo, 77th Battalion. We are facing overwhelming enemy forces, requesting immediate reinforcement." The response came within minutes. "Commander, reinforcement en route. The 112th Battalion departed 6 hours ago. Hold your position. Help is coming." Okonkwo smiled grimly. "Understood. We will hold." She turned to her exhausted soldiers and spoke words that would echo through history. "Earth is sending another battalion. All we have to do is survive until they arrive. I know you're tired. I know you're scared. But those civilians behind us are counting on us. So we hold. We hold until our brothers and sisters arrive. And then we show these bugs what humanity really looks like." A ragged cheer rose from the lines. Exhausted soldiers found new strength. The perimeter stabilized. In orbit, Captain Al-Rashid detected new contacts emerging from hyperspace. Human contacts. The 112th Battalion had arrived. 900 fresh soldiers hit the ground running. Colonel James Odia led the 112th Battalion personally, his dropship landing in the center of the battered human perimeter. He was 52 years old, with gray temples and a calm voice that never rose above conversation level, even in combat. "Commander Okonkwo," he said, clasping her hand. "I hear you've been having some fun without us." Okonkwo laughed despite everything. "Wouldn't call it fun exactly, Colonel. But we're glad you're here." The 112th immediately moved to reinforce the weakest sections of the line. Fresh soldiers replaced exhausted veterans. New ammunition flooded into empty bunkers. Medical teams brought supplies that Dr. Nyambura had run out of hours ago. And then the humans did something the Krasith never expected. They attacked. Master Sergeant Rosa Delgado led a demolitions team through a gap in the enemy lines under cover of darkness. She was 44, quiet and precise, with a reputation for making things explode at exactly the right moment. Her target was the Krasith Forward Ammunition Depot, a massive structure filled with plasma charges and fuel cells. If it went up, the entire enemy offensive would lose its supply line. "Charges set," Delgado reported quietly. 30 seconds to detonation. Her team retreated into the shadows. Behind them, the depot erupted in a fireball visible from orbit. The explosion threw the Krasith offensive into chaos. Warriors who had been advancing suddenly found themselves without support. Weapons that needed plasma cells went silent. The overwhelming numerical advantage began to mean nothing without ammunition to use it. Colonel Odia seized the moment. "All units, advance. Push them back." For the first time since the battle began, human soldiers moved forward instead of holding ground. The two battalions worked in perfect coordination, one pressing the attack while the other protected their flanks. Flight leader Henrik Larsson flew his dropship through enemy fire again and again, evacuating wounded soldiers and civilians to the safety of orbiting medical ships. His aircraft was hit 7 times. He kept flying. "I've got 20 Valorans and 6 wounded soldiers," Larsson reported. Heading to the carrier. "You're leaking fuel," Captain Al-Rashid warned. "You might not make it back. Then I'd better fly faster." He made it. Barely dot on the ground, the Krasith found themselves fighting a different kind of enemy. These were not desperate defenders anymore. These were predators who smelled weakness. Private Asante, who had been terrified during his first combat 3 days ago, now moved with the confidence of a veteran. He had saved Valoran lives. He had watched friends die. He had discovered something about himself that he never knew existed. When a Krasith warrior broke through and headed toward a group of Valoran workers, Asante did not hesitate. He threw himself at the creature, bringing it down with the weight of his body, and finished it with his combat knife. The Valoran workers stared at him with something like worship. "Go to the shelter," Asante said calmly. "You'll be safe there." Counselor Thessa Vorn had traveled from council headquarters to observe the battle personally. What she witnessed shook her understanding of the galaxy. Humans were not just fighting. They were winning. Against a force that should have destroyed them, they were actually winning. "Why do you do this?" she asked Commander Okonkwo during a brief lull in the fighting. "Your casualties are significant. You have no treaty obligations to these Valorans. No strategic interest in this system. Why sacrifice so much for nothing?" Okonkwo fixed the counselor with a steady gaze. "Every life has value. That's not a strategy, counselor. That's a belief. And it's not nothing. It's everything." The battle continued through the night. By dawn, the Krasith had been pushed back 3 miles from the civilian areas. Their losses exceeded 20,000 warriors. Their ammunition supplies were destroyed. Their commanders were dead or scattered. Hive Overseer Vexithan surveyed the destruction with cold fury. He had brought 30,000 warriors to crush 800 humans. Now he commanded fewer than 10,000, and 2 human battalions stood between him and his objective. "We retreat," he ordered. "Signal all surviving forces. We retreat." His subordinates were shocked. The swarm had never retreated from any enemy in recorded history. "Overseer, we cannot simply. We can and we will." Vexithan watched the human lines through his observation equipment. He saw soldiers helping wounded Krasith warriors, treating their injuries despite everything. These humans are unlike anything we have faced. We need time to understand them, time to prepare new strategies. As the Krasith began their withdrawal, something remarkable happened. Human soldiers captured a group of wounded Krasith warriors who could not escape. Instead of executing them, The humans carried them to medical stations and treated their wounds. Ambassador Sarati witnessed this and felt his understanding of the universe shift completely. They show mercy to their enemies, he said to Elder Velithai. After everything the Krasith have done, they still show mercy. Velithai watched a human medic carefully bandaging a Krasith warrior's injured leg. The alien was clearly confused, waiting for the killing blow that never came. Perhaps, Velithai said slowly, this is why they fight so hard for strangers. They see value in all life, not just their own, even the lives of those who tried to destroy them. Vexithin paused before boarding his transport ship. He turned to face the distant human positions and spoke words that would be transmitted across the galaxy. The swarm will remember this defeat, but we will also remember what you are, humans. You are not conquerors. You are guardians. And that makes you far more dangerous than any enemy we have ever faced. Then he was gone, and the battle for Tessari 7 was over. The memorial stood where the heaviest fighting had occurred. Commander Okonkwo read the names aloud, one by one. 127 human soldiers had died defending Tessari 7. Each name represented a life given freely for strangers. Each name was now carved into stone that would stand for generations. Valoran civilians filled the space behind the human soldiers, their compound eyes reflecting the morning light. They had come to honor their protectors, to witness this strange human ritual of remembering the dead. Elder Velithai stepped forward when the names had all been spoken. In her 4 hands, she carried a traditional Valoran blessing stone, a crystal that her people believed contained the essence of gratitude itself. We have no words sufficient for what you have done, Velithai said, her voice carrying across the silent gathering. You came when no one else would. You fought when no one asked you to. You died so that strangers could live. She placed the blessing stone at the base of the memorial. My people will never forget. For as long as Valorans exist in this galaxy, we will remember the humans who saved us. A young Valoran child approached Private Asanti after the ceremony. This was the same child he had protected during the battle, the small creature with trembling wings who had asked why humans saved strangers. You did not die, the child said, obviously relieved. Asanti knelt to meet the child's eyes. No, I didn't. Will you come back if we need help again? Asanti smiled and put his hand on the child's shoulder. Kid, if you call for one human, 1,000 will answer. That's just who we are. Across the colony, reconstruction had already begun. Human engineering teams worked alongside Valoran workers to rebuild what the Krasith had destroyed. Medical facilities that had been treating combat wounds now helped with the longer process of recovery and healing. Dr. Nyambura had not stopped working since the battle ended. She had treated over 400 patients, human and Valoran alike. Her colleagues had tried to make her rest. She refused. There are still people who need help, she said simply. I'll rest when everyone is healthy. In the colony's main hall, a historic communication was taking place. President Amara Kante of the Terran Federation appeared via hologram to address the assembled dignitaries, including Councillor Vorn and representatives from a dozen galactic species. The events on Tessari 7 have shown the galaxy something important, President Kante said. Her voice was firm but warm. Humanity does not calculate the value of lives. We do not weigh strategic interests against suffering. When innocent people are in danger and we can help, we help. It is that simple. Councillor Vorn shifted uncomfortably. Her species had spent centuries building complex diplomatic frameworks that avoided direct confrontation. The human approach confused and frightened her. President Kante, Vorn said carefully, the Council appreciates your intervention, but your methods are concerning to some member species. This level of military commitment for a non-strategic target suggests unpredictability. Admiral Kenji Watanabe, commander of the Terran fleet, responded before the president could speak. Counselor, let me be clear. We are not unpredictable at all. Our behavior is entirely consistent. When people need protection, we protect them. When bullies threaten the weak, we stand against them. There is nothing complicated about this. Ambassador Sarati rose to speak. His voice trembled with emotion. I asked for 30 soldiers. 30. I expected the galaxy to ignore us, as it always has ignored small colonies with nothing to offer. Instead, humanity sent nearly 2,000 warriors to save 4,000 strangers. He looked around the hall at the gathered dignitaries. I have served as ambassador for 40 years. I have seen countless diplomatic agreements and strategic partnerships, but I have never seen anything like what the humans did here. They did not ask for payment. They did not demand territory. They simply came because we needed help. Sarati's voice rose with conviction. When we called for backup, we expected soldiers. Humanity sent heroes. The hall fell silent. Even Counselor Vorn had no response. Outside, Commander Okonkwo prepared her battalion for departure. The 77th had earned a rest, and transport ships waited to carry them home. But leaving was harder than she expected. Valoran families lined the streets as the human soldiers marched to their ships. Children waved. Adults bowed in the traditional gesture of deepest respect. Some cried openly. Lieutenant Minsa walked beside Okonkwo. "Think we'll ever come back here?" "Probably not," Okonkwo admitted. "But that's okay. We did what we came to do." "And what was that exactly?" Okonkwo looked at the grateful faces around her, at the colony that had been hours from destruction, at the children who would grow up because humans had chosen to fight for them. "We showed the galaxy what humanity is. Not our weapons, not our technology, our hearts." First Sergeant Bota joined them as they reached the transport ships. He carried a small bag filled with gifts from Valoran families. Handmade crafts, written messages, small tokens of gratitude. "What are you going to do with all that?" Mensa asked. "Keep every piece," Bota said. "Forever." The ships lifted off one by one. Below, the Valoran colony grew smaller, then disappeared behind clouds. Then behind the curve of the planet itself, in the colony's main square, Elder Velathai stood with her people and watched the human vessels climb toward the stars. The young child who had befriended Private Asani stood beside her. "Will they really come back if we need them?" the child asked. Velathai remembered everything she had witnessed. The soldiers who fought without sleep. The medics who healed enemy wounded. The commander who refused to abandon strangers even when the galaxy offered her an easy escape. "Yes," Velathai said with absolute certainty. "They will always come." Across the galaxy, species who had never considered humanity began to look at them differently. The Valorans told their story to everyone who would listen. The Krassiths spoke of their defeat in hushed tones. Even the Galactic Council, for all its concerns about human unpredictability, could not ignore what had happened. Humanity had announced themselves not as conquerors or rivals, but as protectors. And in a galaxy full of species who calculated everything in terms of power and advantage, that simple truth changed everything. The message spread from system to system, world to world. If you are in danger, if you have nowhere else to turn, call the humans. They will answer. They will always answer.